sense. I shouldn't say this because I don't know how competitive this space is, but in software, in professional consulting, if you tell people you can save them 10% or 20%, that's a winner. That's a pitch that people jump at because they're like, oh, wow, I can actually run that same spreadsheet. You know, it's always a spreadsheet, right? I can run that spreadsheet and it'll tell you like how long does it take for this thing to pay for itself. And that's actually something you try to tackle in your pitch, which I thought was very smart. But 10% or 20%, I mean, you're blowing that out of the water. You're saying, you know, not only is there a labor shortage, but you know, it's a 50% savings. So who are you trying to sell to? Like, who is your customer?
So our customers are anybody in construction, anybody in woodworking.
Yeah.
But primarily and firstly, which mean the same thing.
I'm okay with it.
It's the residential remodeling market.
Nice.
Residential remodeling. And mainly because those guys in our initial target and our initial focus groups, those guys are the guys that are most excited about it.
Enthusiasm is big. Yeah. I forget who it was recently. I want to say it was Founder Institute. Greg and Randy and their team did something on product market fit. I may have that wrong, but somebody very recently did an event on this, and they said, you know, the more product market fit you have, the easier the initial sales are because of the enthusiasm when people finally find that thing that they've been looking for. So how many of these contractors, right? How many people did you talk to? Ballpark, you know, when you're doing your market research and you're trying to figure out like, what should this thing be and how big should it be and how portable should it be? That sort of thing.
Yeah. So overall, we've talked to a couple hundred guys so far.
Nice. I hate when people talk to two and they're like, well, my uncle and my dad, and it's like, okay, well, they were raised by the same people, so that doesn't count. And then how are you selling that right now? And right now may not even be the right question. Like, start with right now, but tell me if that's really where you want to be.
Yeah. So right now we have an R&D project ahead of us. We still have the final features to wrap up and get ready for production.
Okay.
We are, as soon as we finish that, as soon as we have a completely working prototype with all the new whiz-bang features on it, then it goes to a pre-order. So we're going to start with some sort of pre-order campaign. We don't know if it's going to be, you know, crowdfunding or if it's going to be self-hosted.
Yeah.
Could be one or the other, could be both. And essentially we want to sell 1,000 units in the first year, which is a totally doable number,
I would say.
And then, you know, we want to start licensing conversations with big tool brands.
Yeah. Once people find out that it's good, right?
Yeah, right.
So, I think 1,000 is a totally doable number just based on the fact that more about how to present your ideas at work and succeed in your career.
Startups and salespeople, marketers and managers from the Epicast network in Pittsburgh. It's the Pitchwerks.
I've been a sales rep, a marketer, a manager, an executive, a consultant, and an advisor. This show is designed to give you access to my list of contacts so that you can learn more about how to present your ideas at work and succeed in your career.
Startups and salespeople, marketers and managers from the Epicast network in Pittsburgh. It's the Pitchwerks podcast.
Weeks.
There you go.
Is a variations on that theme as well. So we've got a fenestration app. So we've got a fenestration app that's just windows and doors.
I knew what that was. No, is what defenestration is.
Auto defenestration is when you jump out of a window.
That's terrible.
got a fenestration app that's just windows and doors.
I knew what that was. Because once upon a time I was a 13-year-old boy and I had a defenestration.
Defenestration,
sold
you
to
got
me
it.
in this history class. It's like this is why history is cool. And they're like, yes, there was a guy who was defenestrated. Anyway, yes.
There's
Thrown
also-
out of a window is what defenestration is.
Auto defenestration is when you jump out of a window.
That's terrible. Hey, everybody, it's Scott. It is Wednesday. Welcome back to your Pitchwerks podcast. And I got a special treat in Brad Kreil from Volt. Amount of money and time and effort for construction. A large amount of money and time and effort for. So someone's not pulling their friggin' weight. All right, I'm done being salty. I'm sorry I was rude to you, baby. Let's jump in. Let's talk to Wednesday. Welcome. Hey, everybody, it's Scott. It is Wednesday. Welcome back to your Pitchwerks podcast. And I got a special treat in Brad Kreil from Velocity Robotics. He's going to tell us about, it's the Hardware Cup. It's a big deal. You may not know what it is, though, because, you know, a lot of the app and software people kind of steal the spotlight as far as these pitch competitions. Let's jump in. Let's talk to Brad. Let's have a little bit of an exploration of pitch competitions and those kinds of things. All right, that's the end of the show. Thanks for friggin' wait. Let's jump in. Let's talk to Brad. Let's have a little bit of an exploration of their friggin' wait. Let's jump in. Let's friggin' wait. Let's jump in. Let's talk to Brad. Their friggin' wait. Let's jump in. Let's talk to Brad. Let's have a little bit of an exploration. Wait. Let's jump in. Let's talk to Brad. Let's have a little bit of an exploration of pitch competitions and those kinds of things. Competitions and those kinds of things.
Defenestration,
sold
you
to
got
me
it.
in this history class. Nothing. I know you're not really necessarily thrilled. Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to present Brad Kreil, Velocity Robotics. Man, welcome to the Pitchwerks podcast.
Thanks a lot, Scott.
I know you're not really necessarily thrilled about, you know, like talking about the win, you know, because I'm really glad. And you had been in it before, right?
Yeah.
You had done it before. So the question I would ask, the easy one to ask that everybody always wants to know, right? Like, how does, I am happy. Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to present Brad Kreil, Velocity Robotics. Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to present Brad Kreil, Velocity Robotics. Man, welcome to the Pitchwerks podcast.
Thanks a lot, Scott.
I know you're not really necessarily thrilled about, you know, like talking about the win Hardware Cup, and I'm really glad that that you were able to hold a great big publishers clearinghouse check and get the whole experience. What was that like?
It was incredible. I'm still kind of reeling from it, actually.
Yeah.
I was totally surprised when they announced it was Velocity Robotics.
I'm really glad, and you had been in it before, right?
Yeah.
Like, you had done it before. It was the first time. Like the first time you get the right way to say it. Like, how is that experience different the second and third time from the first time? Like the first time you get
Competitions here and there, and you know,
I might explode.
right,
I felt like I might explode.
right, and you know, if I did ones.
I'm really glad. And you had been in it before, right?
Yeah.
Like, you had done it before. How is that experience different the second and third time from the first time? Like the first time you get up to give a pitch competition presentation, I have to believe, I can't remember. It's been a long time, but I still haven't ever done a pitch competition, right? But the first time I got up and gave a pitch was 21 years ago. And like I remember certain parts of it. Like I could hear my pulse in my ears, right? Like I had like the sweaty palms, like all the stuff they tell you about like public speaking. But this is different because you're not talking to somebody who is going to pay your mortgage, really. You're talking to people that you could easily ration. The third time, how did you feel?
The first time was exactly as you described.
Yeah.
So I remember my pulse. I remember the sweaty palms, and I was nervous as anything.
Dry mouth?
dry mouth. I can't remember if I talked really fast or really slow, but it was
the time bubble's really difficult because there's nothing to use as like a context. There's no context unless there's a ticking clock. You really don't know where you're at.
And I don't remember if they had a clock
right
in the first one. They may have, but in any case, I had practiced a lot. I had everything memorized, and
a recipe for disaster.
It kind of was. Yeah.
I mean, you know now, but
yeah,
it would have been useful for you to know that the first time. What was that? 2 years ago?
It was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think I knew about it about a week in advance.
Oh.
And it was the first time that I'd ever pitched to anybody.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it was. I don't know if it was a disaster, but it was close.
It feels like one.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Most people don't notice the things that we like when we say something's a disaster. We're really talking about our own reaction. We're not talking about actual like tomatoes being thrown from the peanut gallery. Those two old guys from the Muppet Show up there, like this sucks. None of that happens, right?
Right.
So you go from the first one to the peanut gallery. Those two old guys from the Muppet Show up there, like this sucks. None of that happens, right?
Right.
So you go from the first one to the next one. You notice a change.
So the one that I just did was completely the opposite of that.
So you didn't do the second one.
I didn't do one last year. I did a couple of pitch competitions here and there, and I don't know, maybe I made a little bit of progress.
Okay,
but
so it is a big difference because
Yeah.
you're here. I mean, honestly, I'm not trying to like call you out or whatever, but like you're almost like disregarding that second and third. Like, yeah, I did a couple after that or whatever. So the first one was the one that you really felt like I might explode.
Right.
To it. Now, it's still the same till I don't know. You have this sort of like amnesia about things going well, right? So I don't know. You have this sort of like amnesia about things going well, right? So the first one, you're like, it was a disaster. I had the pulse in my ears. I had the sweaty palms. All that stuff is true for me. And then you're like, and then I did it a couple more times, and then I won. Like, it's interesting from a psychological perspective to see how people deal with like, and then it became normal basically. Like you got kind of used to it. Now I was about to be. I don't get to yell at myself without going, often as I can because.
Right.
You have this sort of like amnesia about things going well, right? So the first one, you're like, it was a disaster. I had the pulse in my ears. I had the sweaty palms. All that stuff is true for me. And then you're like, and then I did it a couple more times, and then I won. Like, it's interesting. You got kind of used to it. Now it's still the same product though. It's auto set. whole shop talking to each other though, because
Yeah.
I'm like the king. I don't know if that's right. I got to go back and do it again, or then like I have to scratch it down. cool origin tractor as often as I can. But you would have noticed when you got.
So I worked for Caterpillar for.
I see, though, 50% savings as being a handle that I can grab onto running that saw. Well, wait, back up. You were actually involved to some extent in construction, yes? Often as I can. I see, though, 50% savings is sent on anything, right? Then that sounds like something I should be talking about. The person that's running that saw, what matters, right?
Yeah.
Most people don't going to say it. It was like, wait a minute, I better make sure. Because you may. Wait a minute, hang on, before we do that. Cryle,
you got it.
I was afraid that I was going to say it wrong. An hourly wage, like question with, like, what's an hourly wage? Like, how much money are we spending on inefficiency, right? Like, I'm trying to get to that number. How much are.
Don't show up to work stoned.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it always struck me as a great business to be in, right? It struck me as like a great way to make a living.
It's and I'm not saying that it's not.
No. But if they don't show up, if there's not enough people,
it's real.
Like, what's an hour running that saw? Like, what's an hourly wage? Like, how much money are we spending on inefficiency, right? Like, I'm trying to get to that number. How much are we wasting if we're not using an auto set, you know, at a job site or whatever? Like, what's that 50% cost me as the guy who owns the business?
Yeah. So that's an incredibly complex question because there's
pretend in sales and oversimplify it. It's funny because it's true.
So what does that 50% cost you? We think.
Let's do it like, yeah.
So we think that we can save about 3 days on a 6-week job. And
nice.
Right. And so I've got a spreadsheet, right, that has all of that on it.
But you're an engineer, right? Like, you're a person who thinks this way, right? Let me speak for the seller and the buyer for a moment.
Alrighty.
Right? You said 50%. I just sat there and said, if it's 50%, then that means to me that the miter saw guy who I have a Gantt chart of, right, who's going to be on site for, let's say, a week, is now there for 2.5 days, because that's half of a week, right? That's big money, because now I can move him on to another job and maybe, I don't know, maybe even have him subbed out to other people to do that cut. Or maybe the guy that runs the saw, he's a freelancer, because this contractor doesn't always need a miter saw guy. Am I anywhere near something that could be true?
Yeah.
Throw me a bone. Pretend I'm right.
Yeah, that is absolutely right.
Okay, good.
Absolutely. No question about it. But there are additional items as well. So,
okay.
One, huge skilled labor shortage in construction right now. Nearly every contractor we've talked to has told us how hard